Today I will be talking about the flipped classroom. Let's start out by asking, what exactly is the flipped classroom? Contrary to popular belief, according to the article The Flipped Classroom Pro and Con by Edutopia by Mary Beth Hertz, a flipped classroom is not just boring online Khan Academy videos. Rather, it is a combination of two important elements: in-class structured activities and online instructional videos created by the teacher. Now, it's super important that the teacher is the one who creates their own videos to ensure that the students are being taught the material that they choose, and so that there can be a connection between the teacher and his or her students. So the instructional video would be something like you're currently listening to right now. I am making this video with Screen-O-Matic, which is something you could easily use to make your instructional videos. And these videos shouldn't be too long. In fact, there's a time limit on most of the screencasting software, so they can't be too long. And it would be most effective on an iPad or some sort of screen that the teacher can write on so that they can write notes like they would on the board. Especially this is important in a math classroom so they can write out examples for the students to see. There are also some tools such as Edpuzzle, which is an online source that allows teachers to upload a video and then pause the video occasionally to ask the students questions. And this is important because it would allow the teacher to have a formative assessment of how the students are understanding the videos or not understanding them so that they can really craft what they're going to do in class the next day based on what the students are and are not understanding. Beyond the videos though, what's really important is that there's good in-class supported activity time. In an article titled The Flipped Class, What Does a Good One Look Like? By Brian Bennett, Jason Kern, April Gudenrath, and Philip McIntosh, these class periods should include student-led discussions that feature critical thinking and collaboration between students. It's expected that students work together during class to understand and practice the material, and the teacher is kind of the guide on the side, as they say. They describe this shift as students going from passive listeners to active learners, and I really like the idea of that because so often in school, students just sit there with glazed over eyes staring at a teacher doing something on the board, whereas in this method, the kids do that part of the learning at home, and then at school they can really go into deeper activities and learn more about the material. So first I want to talk about some positives because there are a ton. Let's look at a few. I compiled most of these positives from a journal article named 10 Reasons to Flip by Kathleen Fulton, who actually was a high school math teacher at Byron School District, which is down near Rochester, Minnesota. And I also got some more of the positives from the pros and cons of the flipped classroom on teachhub.com from the K-12 Teachers Alliance. I just want to emphasize a few points. The first is that the flipped classroom really allows for individualization. This is because students can watch the videos over and over again if they're not understanding the points, or if they do understand it, they can just watch it once and move on with the material. It also allows for a lot of differentiated instruction during classroom hours because, like I talked about before, if the teacher were to use an online assessment with the video, then during class they could use some differentiated activities to give to the students who maybe are struggling more, or those who completely understand it. They could have more problem-solving activities. Also, it's helpful that the videos are always out there because then if a student forgets something or if they want to review before a test, they can go back and rewatch the videos. This would also be super useful for EL students because oftentimes they struggle with vocabulary or not knowing the words in class. And so if they didn't understand something during the videos, they could just pause the video and look it up or translate it or do whatever they need to do, which is something that they can't do during class. It also can be useful for parents, because I know a lot of parents oftentimes will say, I can't help my student because I don't know what they're doing, especially in a math class. And so with these videos, they really don't have that excuse anymore, because they can watch the video with their student and hopefully learn a little something themselves or be able to better help their student. Also, having all of class time each day just allows for a lot more creative activities to happen. More projects can be done, or more manipulative experiences can be had. One note is that there have been some studies that have shown higher achievement in the flipped classroom based on different assessments that have been given out, or like the same assessment is given out in a flipped classroom versus a traditional classroom. And some studies do show that there is higher achievement in the flipped classroom, but others don't say that's necessarily so. So there's the chance to have higher achievement, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. It mostly depends on the students that you have in your class and how motivated they are. Ultimately, those students say that they enjoy this method because it breaks up their day. They're no longer just sitting in class staring at lectures all day, every day, and it can help them engage more during class. Also, one last thing to note is that this really solves a lot of problems for students who are absent, because they can still watch the videos online just as they usually would. As we've talked a lot about in Ed 352, and we've also touched on in our methods class, it's important to use different types of thinking, especially in the math classroom, and we've talked specifically about Bloom's taxonomy. Well, in the flipped classroom, the bottom levels, or the basic levels of Bloom's taxonomy, are done outside of the classroom, which leaves more time inside of the classroom for more creativity, or more time to analyze different problems or to apply their knowledge, which doesn't always happen in a traditional setting. I think that the flipped classroom really caters to the 21st century skills, which include creativity, critical thinking, community, and collaboration. I think all of these elements are easily and naturally integrated into the flipped classroom, because during class time the students are expected to collaborate and communicate their ideas together. And also, as you can see here in Bloom's taxonomy, creativity is a big part of that, and there's more time to do creative classroom activities, and also to learn those good critical thinking skills. On the flip side, there are definitely some negatives to the flipped classroom. Let's look at a few. So, one main problem that was pointed out in many different articles is that the flipped classroom completely relies on internal motivation of the students. They have to be the ones who watch the videos. They have to be the ones who ask questions during class. No longer can they just lazily sit in class, but they actually have to participate and engage. And that can be really difficult, especially from a class of 30 high school students who don't necessarily want to be there, to motivate them to watch the videos. I feel like I could maybe combat this, though, by integrating a formative assessment into my videos, because then there would be some points or some type of assessment that goes with the video, which may help motivate students to actually watch them. In a journal article called Flipping a Calculus Class, One Instructor's Experience by Katrina Palmer, some students explained their concerns, and one stated that this type of learning is not exactly conducive to shy or quiet students who might be afraid to ask for help, because it depends so much on students reaching out to the teacher in class to explain what they don't understand, which may be difficult for some students to ask. Another teacher's concern from the pros and cons of the flipped classroom article was that videos can be difficult to make as a teacher. When you're making a video without an audience, it's hard to know, are my students understanding? Are they bored? Are they lost? It's impossible to know because you're not actually there seeing their faces, seeing their nonverbal communications. Above all, my biggest concern with the flipped classroom is internet access. As you can see here, in 2013, only 82.5% of all households with school-age children at home had access to a high-speed connection. This leaves 17.5% of households without that. And the flipped classroom relies so much on having the videos and having access, and I'm not sure how accurate these statistics are today, but either way it means that there are still kids out there who don't have access to the internet or a computer at home. So is there a solution to that? Mary Beth Hertz claims that while there are many methods, each has its own flaws. For example, you can have kids visit their local library, but what if the library only has 4 computers and there's wait time and you only have a certain amount of time you get to spend on your computer? Or some other people say that you can burn the videos onto DVDs. Well, that takes a ton of time and resources on the teacher's end. Or what about using the school's computer lab? This would most likely result in the need for an after-school program, which isn't always available. However, I do think there are some good options, like perhaps a student could visit a friend's house and they could watch the videos together. Or maybe the student can visit the computer lab during lunch. I mean, I know it's not ideal, but it would work. And also, many students have smartphones, so even if they don't have a computer or internet access at home, they could probably find a few minutes during their school day to access the video on their phone at school. So what's my conclusion? I feel like the flipped classroom has many benefits, and depending on the students in my class, I definitely would like to try this out. It wouldn't have to be for an entire semester or for all my classes or anything, but maybe even just a week's worth of lessons. It would allow my students to practice their 21st century skills and frees up more of my class time to explain the why to math that so often gets left behind. I don't think this method would necessarily work in every school, but I think for some it could be very beneficial and it could be a great experience for all involved. I would have a lot of upfront work to do by making the videos and creating the content, but I think that the benefits would outweigh that time. I can see how this method would fit in with each national board standard, but especially with Propositions 3 and 4. Proposition 3 talks about the teachers being responsible for student learning, and I think that the flipped classroom definitely is. The teacher really has to work on understanding what the students understand and knowing who's on track and who's falling behind, and it really caters to each individual student. Proposition 4 also talks about how teachers kind of about reflecting and how they learn from their experiences. And again, this kind of forces teachers to do that because they know the next day whether their videos were effective or not. And if you find out that your video wasn't effective, you can make a new one that day and give it to your students, or save it and use it the next year. In terms of the Minnesota Standards of Effective Practice for Teachers, I found it really difficult to even pick out a few, just because most of them seem to fit with the flipped classroom. Specifically, I'll talk about 3D, which says, use a student's strength as a basis for growth and a student's errors as opportunities for learning. As I talked about before, if I were to use an assessment with my online videos, this would be super easy to